Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Daily Devotionals with John. Today, our words for the day, there's two words, and it is compassion fatigue. That's right, compassion fatigue. This is something that many people who have to deal with other people all the time struggle with, sometimes constantly. Pastors, police officers, those good people who are working in the grocery stores to restock all of those groceries that we've shredded through and we've tried to hoard. Some of us have hoarded groceries. Nurses, doctors alike, they struggle with compassion fatigue. So, what do the scriptures say about this? And what is compassion fatigue? And how do we fix it? Let's dive right in. First scripture today is going to come from Mark chapter 6. This is verses 30 and 31. And he says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while, for many people were coming and they did not even have time to eat. So here we find ourselves with the disciples and Jesus. And this is right before they fed the 5,000. Well, they were already tired from a long day's work and several days they had traveled, and they were fatigued, physically fatigued. They were worn out. And Jesus told them, you know what, jump in the boat. Let's head across the water. We're going to go to this remote place and we'll get some rest there. So they jump in the boat and they head across the water. But when they get there to the other side, the people had chased them around the shoreline and they met them there at the boat. Well, and Jesus, he felt compassion for the people. So he got off the boat and he started to minister to them. He started to listen to their questions they had and answer their questions. All the while, the disciples, they were still tired. They were still hungry. They were still worn out from all of their teaching and all of their travels that they had done. But it started to get late, and the disciples began to ask Jesus, said, can we leave? Can we get out of here? Let's bail. Let's go get some food in a town. Let's go get something to eat. We're hungry. And all these people here are hungry, and we don't have enough to feed them. And basically Jesus said, yeah, you feed them. And he's like, with what? Well, it would cost 200 denarii to feed all these people, Jesus. What are we going to do? And 200 denarii, that was like a half of a year's wages back then. So Jesus said, well, what do you have? And of course, there were 5 loaves and 2 fish. Well, we know the rest of the story. They feed the 5,000, and when it's all said and done, they had 12 baskets of food left over. So they had plenty of food. Well, the disciples by this time were seriously exhausted. So Jesus said, y'all jump in the boat, head on over. I'll meet you guys on the other side. They get halfway across the water and they're exhausted. The wind is in their face. The wind is getting choppy and they can't paddle any further. They are absolutely exhausted. And what happens? Jesus performs another miracle. He comes walking across the water to them. And here in our second scripture, we see, then he got into the boat with them and the wind ceased. They were completely astounded. They were completely astounded. So Jesus came and helped them with their struggle and got them across to the other side. But the bottom line of this is that even though we get worn out, Jesus doesn't. Jesus doesn't get worn out. He does not have compassion fatigue. He will always be there for you. He will always be there for me. I've got 2 articles that are listed in the description of this video. And in the first article is where I got the scriptures from this for today. And in that article, he talks about people who get exhausted. He talks about tragedies. A tragedy that happened around us recently is tornadoes. We had all these tornadoes rip through Middle Tennessee. And after a few days of seeing it every day on the TV, people had donated millions of dollars to the relief efforts. But after 3 or 4 days, you don't hear about it anymore on TV. And people got tired of hearing about it. So they quit doing it. They quit playing it on TV and quit showing us the progress that things were being done and made. And instead, we switched over to more COVID-19 information, because that's what people were driven by and wanting to hear about. We got tired of hearing about the tornadoes, and that's not really a good thing. There are still people in need that we should be compassionate towards, but we get worn out on it. Our doctors and our nurses, can you imagine after a 36-hour shift how tired and exhausted and tired of seeing the same symptoms in people just over and over and over again with this pandemic that's going on? What about our employees that are there at the grocery stores when they see people fighting over toilet paper? How do you think they feel? They get pretty tired and start not really feeling sorry for you anymore when you don't have any. They lose their compassion. But Jesus never loses him. One of the things he talked about was the movie with Bill Murray. It's called Groundhog Day. It's a classic. If you haven't seen it, go see Groundhog Day. Look it up, find it, see Groundhog Day. And during one of the times, Bill Murray is reliving the same day over and over. And there's this scene in Groundhog Day where this child falls out of a tree. And every day he catches this kid and saves this kid from falling out of a tree. And after you've seen this happen over and over and over, you begin to see even Bill Murray start to get kind of weary of doing the same thing over and over. And he's like, oh, kid, I'm catching you again today. So what do we do to combat compassion fatigue? How do we get past it? I read another article in that description, and the link is in the description. And that here, right, I'm going to put on the screen some things that can help you with compassion fatigue. How do you recover from compassion fatigue? You feel free to pause this video and write these down if you want to. Be aware of changes in your level of compassion fatigue. In other words, when you start becoming impatient with people. Number 2, make self-care a priority. You cannot fill someone else's cup if yours is empty. Number 3, spend time with friends. In these day and ages, a Zoom meeting is great. Some Facebook time with some friends, some Skyping with friends is good. Number 4, join a caregiver support group. There are plenty of support groups around here. People who are caregivers for elderly family members, they get this compassion fatigue just as much as doctors and everyone else do, and pastors do. Number 5, write in a journal. This is a very easy way to relieve some stress and get past this compassion fatigue that we get. Number 6, use positive ways to cope with stress. Like we said, writing in a journal is one of those. Go take a walk, Number 7, spend some time on hobbies. And number 8, when all else fails, speak with a counselor or a therapist. One thing that I know is I know many pastors, and I know several police officers. I know several politicians and people who are in leadership positions in the government. And I'm not sure that I know a single one of them who has never had at least some sort of counseling in their lifetime. Most leaders need it at some point in their careers. And that's not to say that you're a psycho if you have to go get a counselor. That's not what it is. Everybody needs some help sometimes because we're not Jesus. Now, you can look to the Bible, and that's a great place to go. But also finding professional counseling for this compassion fatigue is a great thing to do. Don't be embarrassed about it, because most successful people have had counseling at some point. I'll just go ahead and tell you that most have. So that being said, I'm going to leave you with this last scripture. And this last scripture, again, it says, "Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased. They were completely astounded." I'll ask you, are you going to let Jesus in the boat with you? Or are you going to continue to sail on your own and burn out? Blessings. I hope this has touched you, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.